everyone, it's Angie. If you're just hopping on the call, we're going to wait a few minutes here. It's barely 8 o'clock. So if you're here, please feel free to throw your name up in the chat window. Let me know you're here. Let me know where you are. We'll be sitting here for a little bit, for a few minutes, just to let everybody hop on. I see some of you are hopping on, so if you are, we're just going to be a little patient here and let people have some time to get on. We'll probably start around 5 after 8. So if you're just hopping on, by all means, get comfy, get yourself a piece of paper and a pen, and in the chat window, let me know you're here, let me know where you are. Hey guys, it's Angie. I see some people are starting to hop on the call. It is just 8:01, so we're going to wait a little bit and let some people jump on. And as you hop on, please feel free to put your name in the chat window. Let me know you're here. And if you want, you could tell me where you live and where you're checking in from. Again, I see some of you are hopping on, so it's about 2 after 8. I'm going to wait a few more minutes just to let some other people pop on. So if you're just hopping on, you could grab a pen and some paper and get yourself a nice quiet space to listen to the webinar. For those of you hopping on, please feel free to go ahead and put your name in the chat window for me. Let me know you're here. And we still have people hopping on, so I'm going to wait a few more minutes and we will get started very soon. If you want to take notes, go ahead and grab yourself a pen and paper, and we'll get started in about 3 or 4 minutes. Okay, I'm going to wait about 1 or 2 more minutes. We still have a couple people hopping on, so just be patient, get yourself some water, get a pen and paper, make yourself comfy, and we'll get started here in a minute. Okay. I actually just got one other message outside of the chat from somebody that they are still getting on, so I'm going to wait just 2 more minutes, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. If you have any questions or anything you would like me to talk about this evening, by all means, you can put that in the chat window. I would be happy to answer any questions or address any concerns you might have around forgiveness. Okay, so it's about 6 after. I'm going to go ahead and get started. There are still people hopping on, but I will catch everybody up if need be. I want to be cognizant of your time and not run over. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. First, let me say thank you for signing up for this webinar. Thank you for joining me in this conversation about forgiveness. I think it's going to be a fun conversation. Forgiveness isn't the easiest of topics, but it does make for interesting conversation. I do want you to find yourself a quiet space. You don't necessarily need a pen and paper unless you really do want to take notes. We are going to go over a few, an exercise and a few tips about forgiveness. So if you want to take notes, go ahead and get yourself some pen and paper. Otherwise, you should be good to go. So many of you already know me, but just as a quick refresher, my name is Angie. I run a business called Angie Andrews Inspire. And my business is about mentoring women one-on-one in workshops and in a retreat setting on self-care, self-love, and creating self-care practice. I've started doing these monthly webinars because I find that there's all these topics that people are interested in who don't necessarily want to read a blog, and this tends to be a nicer way for them to learn. So I've been working on different topics every month. This month I had a request. Actually, last month during my intuition webinar, I asked if anyone had a specific request for a topic, and forgiveness was brought up. So that's how I got to the topic of forgiveness for today's webinar. And I will have to say that this wasn't the easiest of topics for me. When that was suggested, I had a lot of resistance towards actually writing the outline for this webinar. Forgiveness is not the easiest of topics. It's kind of hard work. Our ego wants to fight for all it's worth to prove that we're right. And so forgiveness can be a really hard topic. So when this came up, I thought, if I'm having this much resistance, it must mean that I need to do some work around this. So here we are doing our workshop on forgiveness. And I like the topic because really, just like everything else I talk about, forgiveness comes back to self-care, self-love, and deep connection with self when you boil it down. And so it really is in the realm of my work. And I'm excited to talk about this with you. So I wanted to start with a discussion about what is forgiveness, because I think forgiveness is different for lots of people, it means different things. So The forgiveness we're going to be talking about tonight is letting go, releasing resentment, releasing the negative energy around that resentment. Resentment and holding on to grudges builds a wall around our heart and doesn't really allow us to share love the way we can when we release and let go of that energy. And so for me, that's what forgiveness work is about. Forgiveness work is about releasing the energy around resentment and about letting go. For me, forgiveness is not about saying the person was right or wrong and that you're right and they're wrong. That's not really the discussion here, because honestly, that will go around and around and around. So I am not talking about that. We're not really talking about who's right and who's wrong, and getting to the bottom of that, because sometimes that's just not going to happen. So we're more talking about letting go and releasing the need to resolve it and to feel like someone is right or wrong. That's the forgiveness we're going to be talking about. And I also wanted to talk about the importance of identifying the lesson when we're trying to forgive. Because when someone has either wronged us, or we perceive that they've wronged us, or we have wronged someone else, there's a lesson in that. Every person we come in contact with in our life is put in our path as a teacher. They're here to teach us something. There's a lesson there. And so part of forgiveness is identifying that lesson and really trying to figure out where that lesson plays into our lives. And so identifying the lesson is part of the process. And then the other piece I really want to talk about in this webinar is realizing that everything that happens in our life is part of our journey. It's placed there for a reason. And so even though these instances where we need to forgive somebody, maybe for something small and maybe for something huge, those instances are part of our journey, our unique journey. And there really are no mistakes in that journey. So though the experience may not be positive, there's a lesson, it's part of our journey. And so embracing that and then releasing the energy is a really important part of the work of forgiveness. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. The first piece I wanted to talk about was actually forgiveness of others. We are going to talk about forgiveness of ourselves, and we are going to talk about how forgiveness is a spiritual practice. But I thought it would be good to start first with forgiving others, because I honestly think forgiving others is easier for us than forgiving ourselves. I think we tend to be our own harshest critics. We're way harder on ourselves a lot of times than we are on others. And so I think sometimes forgiving others can be a little easier than forgiving ourselves. So we're going to talk about that first. Actually, forgiving others can lead to forgiving of ourselves. And so I just wanted to read a quick quote from one of my favorite authors, Marianne Williamson. And that quote says, "As you forgive others, you begin to forgive yourself. As you stop focusing on their mistakes, you will stop punishing yourself for your own. Your ability to release what you think of as the sins of others will free you to release yourself, putting down the weapon with which you punish yourself so savagely." I thought that was a beautiful quote for this webinar, because it really is true. And I have found it in my own life that the kinder and gentler I am with those around me, the kinder and gentler I can be with myself. Same with forgiveness. The more I forgive those around me, the easier it becomes to forgive myself. So I wanted to make sure to share that quote. I also want to point out that sometimes the forgiveness process, especially for a really deep wound or a really traumatic experience, the process of forgiving can actually be more difficult than the actual incident or wrongdoing. Because especially if we've let that fester, if we've let it sit, if we've pushed it down, the act of forgiveness brings it all back up again and has us dealing with it on a whole nother level. And so sometimes the act of forgiving can actually be more difficult. than the actual event or situation that we're trying to forgive. So let's talk about some helpful practices for forgiving others. And you'll see in a little bit that these exercises can actually be used for forgiveness of self too. But first, we're going to talk about other people. So one thing that you can do as a practice to work on forgiving others is to try to see that person through the eyes of compassion. So using your heart and not your ego, not your mind, to look at this person and look at them from a place of compassion and love instead of fear and anger. So thinking about this person from the perspective of how hurt must this person be, or how much pain must this person be in, or what must this person be going through on their side that would allow them to hurt me the way they did. So that's looking at it in a very empathetic, very compassionate way, thinking there must be something going on here for this to happen. That is, again, not excusing the behavior. We're not talking about excusing the behavior. We are not saying what you did was right. What we're trying to do here is find a way to release energy and let go of resentment. So looking through the eyes of compassion, looking at the person, I guess you could say like God would, without the judgment and without everything behind it that our ego is wanting to say, I'm right and you're wrong. So through the eyes of compassion is one way. And then another is just what I said before, which is realizing this experience was part of my journey. This person was put in my path for a reason. This person was put here to teach me something. And so though this has been painful and I'm not enjoying this, and I really don't want to be doing this, this is part of my journey. And there's a lesson here. And so kind of stepping back, looking at it that way, can take a little bit of the emotion out of it, can take a little bit of the ego out of it, and allow us to just see it for what it is, which is a lesson. And that's not to say it's not still going to hurt, because when we've been hurt, we've been hurt. But when we can look at it a different way, when we can look at it through compassion, when we can take the mind out and look with the heart, it can kind of shift the perspective a little bit. So those are a couple things, couple exercises, couple ways of thinking that we can use to help us with forgiveness. The other thing is this exercise that I learned that I wanted to share with you. And so we're actually going to go ahead and do this exercise together. And you can use this in your own life. So the first thing we're going to do is I want you to sit, plant your feet on the ground so that you're firmly in your seat. Feel your bum on the chair. Feel grounded. And I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to just take 3 deep centering breaths. So we're going to breathe in and breathe out. And breathe in and breathe out. And breathe in and breathe out. And now that we're a little more centered, I want you to picture a person. In fact, keep your eyes closed. And I want you to picture a person in your mind that you feel like you need to forgive for something. Picture their face. Picture them they're either standing right in front of you, or perhaps they're sitting right next to you. But I want you to picture that person. Get a really clear picture. Connect with that picture. And then once you have that picture and you see that person, I want you to take a big inhale. And on the inhale, I want you to be breathing in all of the resentment and anger that you feel towards that person. So as you breathe in, feel it wherever it is that you feel resentment and anger. So if your chest is tight, if your belly's tight, wherever it is, I want you to pull it all in on the inhale. And then hold that inhale for a few seconds. And as you're holding that inhale, I want you to see a bright light coming from your heart and bathing that resentment and that anger in a beautiful light. Your light can be pink, it can be purple, it can be whatever color you want your heart light to be. Bathe, and I realize that you can't hold your breath for this long, so we're going to do this another time once we have the concept. So you're breathing in the anger and the resentment. You're holding your breath, and you're bathing that anger and resentment in this beautiful light that's coming from your heart. And then on the exhale, you're sending that newly transformed resentment and anger, that love and light to that person, towards that person. If it helps, sometimes when I do this exercise, I actually breathe like I'm breathing at the person. So sending them my love and light. So we've taken in the anger and the resentment, we've bathed it in our beautiful light and love, and we're sending it back out to them. If this feels strange because you're still angry with this person, that's fine. We're going to do this a few times. On your own, you would do this 5 or 6 times. Breathing in the anger and the resentment, bathing it in light, and sending it out. 5 or 6 times, you're going to do that. And what you'll find is that it starts to carry less energy every time you do it. So let's do it one time together. We're going to breathe in that anger and resentment, and we're going to hold it. We're going to bathe it in our beautiful light, whatever color that is for you. And we're going to exhale it to that person. It helps me to actually picture that person standing in front of me, and I'm sending it to them. So you would do this 5 or 6 times, or until you start to feel less energy around it. For some people, it could be 3 or 4 times. For some people, it could be 10 or 12 times, whatever that is for you. Keep doing it until it starts to feel a little less tight in the chest or the stomach or wherever it is that you've been feeling that when you're thinking about it. When that starts to loosen up a little bit, that's when you can stop. And then the very last thing you're going to do is 3 deep breaths, inhaling deeply, and then on the exhale, I send you love and light, and I release you. 3 times. I send you love and light, and I release you. Now, when you're saying I release you, this does not mean that you're releasing this person from your life. This could be someone that you really care about. This could be someone that you're close with. You have no intention of releasing them from your life. But that release is about that energy around this particular resentment. So I love you. I send you love. I send you light, and I release you. And what that's doing is putting it out there that you want this gone, that you want this negative energy and this resentment that's built up around your heart. You want to release it. If you do this exercise and you do it with full intention of releasing, it works amazingly. So here's my suggestion. If this person that you're trying to forgive is still in your life and you can have a conversation with this person, obviously you want to have a conversation with this person. However, I would suggest doing this exercise first on your own. Release some of the energy, release some of the tension around it, so that when you go into this conversation, you've already sort of toned it down and you're coming much more from a place of love and light and less of like, whoa, I'm mad at you. So conversations face to face, definitely the best way to go in this scenario, but do this exercise first. Take some of the energy out of it, take some of the charge out of it, and then go into the conversation. In the scenario where this person is no longer with us, or you have no way to contact this person, or this person is completely out of your life, a letter is a beautiful way to do this. I realize, obviously, I just said they're not in your life. You can't send this letter. So what you would do is sit down, pen to paper, not typing, because it is not the same. Pen and paper. Write out whatever it is you need to write out. I forgive you. I release this energy. I no longer want this resentment. I love you. I see you, I release you, whatever works for you. Pen to paper, dear so-and-so, write it out. If you want to do this exercise and then write it out, that might even work better. Write that letter out, and knowing that we obviously can't send it to this person if they're deceased, or if they're no longer in your life and you have no way to get this to them, or if you just have no intention of doing that, burn the letter. If you can't burn it, tear it into tiny pieces and flush it, do something. Burning is the best, because when you burn that piece of paper, you release that energy into the ethers, and it releases it for you. If you can't burn it, that's fine, but burning it is a good way to release the energy. So that's an exercise you could do if you do not have access to that person anymore. You have no way to contact them, or they're already deceased. So those are the few things I wanted to talk about around forgiving others. So next, I wanted to talk about forgiving ourselves, because this is so hard. We are our own harshest critics. It is definitely harder for us to be kind and gentle with ourselves than it is with others, especially if you're a woman, because we are givers. It's hard to receive, and especially our own love, our own forgiveness. So this is where it all comes back to self-care, self-love, and deep connection of self. So pretty much every topic I talk about, this is what it all comes back to. It comes back to loving yourself, connecting with yourself, caring for yourself, because we can't forgive ourselves if we're not willing to have a relationship with ourselves in the first place. So forgiving ourselves. Mastering this is very hard, but this is really the only way to create peace and flow in our lives. Holding on to anger and resentment for ourselves holds us back. It keeps us stuck. It keeps us blocked. It's very important to be able to forgive ourselves for transgressions towards ourselves or others. And so it's important work, and no one can do this work for you. This has to be done by you, for you. And so if you really are looking to remove a block, get unstuck, this is probably work that needs to be done. And so part of this is the radical self-care concept of knowing that we're perfect in every moment. What do I mean by that? Because we all know we don't always feel perfect in every moment. What I mean is that regardless of whether we're messing up or making bad decisions, we're perfect in every moment. We need to learn to let go. We need to learn to forgive. And we need to know that sometimes these mistakes were made because a lesson needed to be learned. This was put in our path for a reason. It's the same as what I was talking about with forgiving others. Sometimes people come into our lives to be our teacher, to teach us a lesson. We can be our own teacher. We can teach ourselves our own lessons. And let me tell you that when a lesson needs to be learned and we don't get it the first time, it'll come back again and again and again. May not be in the same form, may not be the same person, but it will come back until it's learned. So really important for us to know that we are our own teachers, that we teach ourselves our own lessons sometimes. And so it may seem like it was a crappy decision or a really nasty thing to do. Yes, it may have been, but it may have been a lesson that needed to be learned. It may have been a bump put in your path for a reason. And so the hard and the important part of that is loving yourself through it. Not a concept that everyone is comfortable with, not something that is easy. But if we're going to forgive ourselves, we need to be able to love ourselves through the mess ups. We need to be able to say, yep, boy, I screwed up. But I send myself love. I send myself light. And I forgive myself. This is hard work to do because this is, this whole time, your mind, your ego is saying, boy, you really F that up. Boy, someone's going to be so mad at you. You are so bad at this. You are so, that's what your mind's going to want to say. That's what your ego is going to want to say. You have to keep connecting back to your heart, to your higher self, to your higher power. You know, if you believe in God or some higher power, you've heard that just by virtue of being a child of God in the universe, you are perfect. You were put here for a reason, and you carry a piece of the divine in your heart. So, regardless of how badly you mess up, you are perfect. And you need to learn to treat yourself in that manner, the same way that your higher power would. Not easy. Not easy at all. But it can be done with work. So I just want to talk a little bit about the practices we just did. So looking at yourself through the eyes of compassion, through the eyes of your higher power, through the eyes of your heart. Being able to say, boy, I must have really been hurting that day, or, oh, I must have really needed to learn this lesson. So just like we would for others, for ourselves, looking through the eyes of compassion. And then that exercise that we just did, it's just as easy to do this exercise for ourselves. So sitting there, breathing in that tension, breathing in that resentment, the bad feelings that you have around this, breathing it in, holding it, bathing it in your light and love, and then sending it back out to yourself. This might take longer to start to release the tension than when we're doing it for someone else, because as I said, we're much more resistant to, loving and caring for ourselves than we are for others. So you may find that it takes a little longer. You may find that the first few times you do it, it doesn't even work. That's fine. That's not a reason to beat yourself up. That's not a reason to say, I can't do this. It's not a reason to say, I'm never going to be able to let go of this. It just means persistence and practice is what you need. Everything in life is a practice. Everything takes practice. So keep that in mind and be patient with yourself. So go ahead and try those exercises in your life that we tried, that we talked about for other people, including the letter. So you can write yourself a letter. If it's something that you did to yourself, you made a bad decision, you messed something up, and you want to write a letter to yourself saying, I'm really sorry for this decision, and I'm really sorry for messing this up. You can do that, and then you can burn it to release the energy. If you did something to someone else, and that's where you're needing to forgive yourself. Again, write the letter out. In the letter, you can even write to the other person and make amends. And then you can burn the letter. If part of the forgiveness you need to do with yourself is making amends with somebody else, if why you're trying to forgive yourself is because you've really hurt somebody that you care about, then by all means, contact that person, make amends, explain that you're sorry, explain that it was a mistake, if it was a mistake. Release some of the energy around it on both sides. I forgive myself for being out of integrity by doing what I did, and I forgive myself by making amends with that person and letting them know that you didn't mean to hurt them. A couple different ways to approach forgiveness of self. It can be two-sided. It can be, I need to forgive myself for the crappy decision, but it can also mean I want to seek forgiveness from the other person. So that's sort of the harder part about forgiveness of self. So that being said, the other thing I wanted to talk about was, how is forgiveness a spiritual practice? I know when I was doing the work for this webinar, that was one thing I really wanted to look at, was how is forgiveness a spiritual practice? Because it is definitely not a ego-driven practice. It is definitely not something that occurs in your mind, because as I talked about earlier, the ego and your mind need to talk about right and wrong, need to talk about anger and protection, and I need to be right, or I need to be, I'm better than that person. Morally, they did the wrong thing. All of that comes from ego and comes from a place of fear. The forgiveness practice I'm talking about does not come from fear. It comes from love. And Marianne Williamson, who I read a quote from earlier, studied a book called The Course in Miracles. And in A Course in Miracles, a miracle is defined as a change in perception from fear to love. And so that's where I'm talking about taking your forgiveness practice, moving away from fear, which is ego-driven, and moving towards love, which is heart-driven. So that's where spirituality comes in to this forgiveness practice. Because we are focusing to look past ourselves, to look past our ego, and to look past another person's darkness and into their light and into their love. And so we're looking past the darkness of the ego and into the heart. That's a very spiritual practice. That is not an earthly ego-driven practice. It's very hard. It's a lot of work. There will be a lot of resistance, because as humans, we want to be right. But again, to create a miracle, move from fear to love. And so in forgiving somebody and in creating a miracle, you really are going to a very spiritual place. Not a religious place, but a spiritual place. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. And the other thing, about the spiritual side of forgiveness is empathy. Empathy is a very spiritual thing. Being able to stop and consider someone else's feelings and someone else's thoughts, and trying to put yourself in their shoes and understand where they're coming from. That's a very deep thing to do. And any of you who may be empathetic beings, I happen to be an extremely empathetic being, know how hard that can be, because sometimes you can feel what another person is feeling, and that can be really hard. But it's a very loving, kind, forgiving thing to do, to be able to put yourself in their shoes and say, oh, maybe they were hurting. Maybe they had a lot of shit and somehow it got taken out on me, and wow, they must have really been in a bad place. That's the spiritual thing to do. That's an empathetic thing to do. And it is a beautiful way to work on forgiveness of another person. As part of that is just, what is their story? We all have a story. What is their story? And how is their story playing into what's going on? Again, part of empathy, part of looking through the eyes of compassion. You can even write about that. What is their story? How did this happen? What might they have been going through? It's a beautiful way to look at forgiveness. So I just wanted to reiterate, this is hard work. This is difficult work. This is not fun work. This is very rewarding work. And I think I said this at the beginning, but anger, resentment, they create a wall around your heart. They keep you from being able to fully love and fully interact in your life. Because when there's resentment and anger, when that energy is present, there is not really peace and flow in your life. There's always this thing hanging out in the background, trying to, make waves. And so forgiveness really is the key in the road to more peace and more flow in your life. And I will say again that when I speak of forgiveness, I'm not saying that that what happened to you was okay. I'm not saying that was appropriate. I am not saying that you deserved it. None of this comes into play. This is not about that. This is about the energy around the resentment and releasing it from your life. If you can get past that, if you can get past the need to be right or to play the victim and to really work on releasing the energy around it, you'll find so much more peace and so much more love in your life. And you can, we all have multiple things that we want to forgive ourselves for, and we may have multiple people that we feel like we need to forgive. As with everything I teach, whether it's self-care, self-love, practice, baby steps towards your desired goal are the key to success. So even if you want to take the smallest thing that you need to either forgive of someone or forgive yourself for, work that energy out. You'll achieve some success. You'll feel better about it. And then the next biggest one won't seem so hard. And you just move from the smallest to the biggest in small action steps. Trying to do everything at once. Oh, I'm just going to forgive everyone in my life. I'm going to do all this energy work now. Setting yourself up for failure. As humans, we expect ourselves a lot of times to fail. And so when we do, we're like, I knew I couldn't do that. I'm just not going to bother. Small, actionable steps create success. It is no different with forgiveness. Give yourself kindness, patience, gentleness, and just let it happen. Instead of trying to take one giant wand and make it all go away. One little person, one little step, one little self-forgiveness at a time, and build on that. And it's not really part of this webinar, but a practice of gratitude can actually help with this. Gratitude can help with anything, honestly. But creating an atmosphere of gratitude in your life, being thankful for what you have every day, can shift everything. And it can even make forgiveness easier. Because when you have a grateful heart, love and kindness are so much easier. So maybe if you're having trouble making that first move towards forgiveness, start with gratitude. Do a small gratitude journal, 5-10 things a day I'm grateful for. Start really focusing on what you have to be grateful for. And once you start to feel that attitude of gratitude, which you will, it's amazing what focusing on gratitude can shift in your life. Then start doing a little bit of forgiveness work. If you're in that space where you really need to kickstart something else before you can do it, if you're really resisting forgiveness, try gratitude first and then move to forgiveness. If you feel like you're ready for forgiveness, go ahead and do these exercises that we did today. Write them down. Do the breathing exercise. I've done them myself. They work. And if when this webinar is over, you don't really remember what I said, you can email me. It's Angie@angieandrewsinspire.com. Email me and ask me. I would be happy to write these out for you. I wanted to end actually with a passage from another Marianne Williamson book. You can't tell. I'm a huge fan of Marianne Williamson. I'm just going to go ahead and read this excerpt. Some of you may have read it. It's from her book, A Year in Miracles. It says, "Any guilt I see in another will bind me to my own perfection. Today, may I see the innocence and love in others, even when they've presented it to me, even if they presented it to me in their darkest of egos. May I be released from my own darkness as I stand willing to see past theirs. Those we need to forgive are our most important teachers, for they indicate the limits to our capacity for forgiveness. Where there is a grievance, there cannot be a miracle. Today, I let go my grievances that I might have a miracle instead. I love the piece where it says, may I be released from my own darkness as I stand willing to see past theirs. Those we need to forgive are our most important teachers. I so see this in my life. It is so true. Does not mean it's easy. Those people who are our teachers are sometimes the people who hurt us the most, who push our buttons the most, who really push the boundaries of who we are. But they are our teachers. And as Marianne says in here, they do indicate the limits of our capacity for forgiveness. Because if we can forgive those people who have hurt us the most, then certainly we can forgive others and forgive ourselves. If you have not read Marianne Williamson's any of her books, by all means, you should. Her stuff's amazing. The crux of it is what I stated earlier from A Course in Miracles, which is a miracle is a change in perception from fear to love. You can apply that to so many things in your life. Self-care, forgiveness, relationships. I mean, you name it, you can apply it. It really is the crux of how I live my life now. And it can make such a huge difference in your life. So if anything, if you needed to take one nugget on forgiveness out of this whole webinar, for me, what I would love for you to take is that forgiveness is about moving from fear to love. It's about seeing past people's darkness and into their light. And really seeing them as part of ourselves, I guess. You know, technically we're all one, no one is separate. I am you, you are me. Sometimes the people in our lives who make us the most crazy, they're actually a reflection of ourselves, and that's why they make us crazy. So really just embrace that we can look past people's darkness and into their light, and we can use eyes of compassion to really do the work of forgiveness. So that's really all I had to say about forgiveness. I did not get any questions in the chat. If you do have any, go ahead and put them up in the chat. And if you don't have any, that's fine. I would like to say this monthly webinar series has been so much fun that I'm actually considering turning it into a monthly workshop series where I will probably use another platform that will be more interactive. So there'll be more chatting within the group. There would be, you know, voice interaction and perhaps worksheets that I would send out prior to the workshop so that we could go over specific things. And I would love some feedback on how you all feel about workshops versus these webinars. I will keep doing something monthly, whether it's just a webinar or a workshop. I'm still working that out, but I really do think that I would like to do something a little more interactive where it's not just me speaking, where people are able to verbally ask questions and interact. So that is sort of where this monthly webinar series is headed. And then secondly, I wanted to say that I am revamping my website and that all of my offerings are not currently there. But I wanted to make sure that all of you, especially those of you who are following this webinar series, know that I have currently a pay what you want 90-minute intensive call, which is aimed at really targeting self-care practice, personal transformation, and where you want to go in your life, and taking the, you know, mapping out those first steps. I obviously also have my 3-month self-care love affair package on there. That's a 3-month one-on-one coaching package. And I am going to be offering a customizable package. I know some people, 90 minutes isn't enough. 3 months is too much. And so with that, I'm going to be starting with a 45-minute to an hour free intro call to try to define what exactly it is that you're looking to do and how long would be the appropriate amount of time for us to work together. So you can look for that on my website coming up in the next couple weeks. My website, obviously, is angieandrewsinspire.com. And if you want to reach me about working with me one-on-one or having me do a workshop in your town, you can email me at it's Angie at angieandrewsinspire.com. So that is all I have for tonight. I hope that you enjoyed the webinar, and hopefully I will see you all again in a month. Have a great night. You are enough. You are loved. And good night.